You mentioned a progression, right? So you played freshman, you played JV, then you played varsity your junior year. Uh, as I understand it, in my research, I didn't see that you transferred high schools. Am I correct in that?
I did not.
So, we're in an era now where it is not uncommon to see one, two, three high school transfers if a player doesn't hit varsity in eighth grade.
I do.
What are your thoughts on just allowing the progression to occur?
Yeah, I think it's necessary. I think for myself, I always enjoyed the adversity, the challenge, because really, when you are faced with adversity or when you're faced with a challenge, the only place you can actually look to is within. If you try to look outside for those things to change your circumstance, you're taking you with you wherever you go. So you can change the location, but guess what? You're coming with you.
Welcome to another episode of How Tall Will They Be? The good news is we're never going to try to answer that question because you can't. We have no idea how tall they're going to be. But I'm excited today to have an amazing guest, Kurt Coleman. Kurt is hailing from Dayton, Ohio, Northmont High School, Ohio State, Philadelphia Eagles, Minnesota Vikings, Kansas City Chiefs, Carolina Panthers, New Orleans Saints, Buffalo Bills, and who knows, maybe even played in Canada. We don't know. We'll find out. He also enjoys dancing, Dancing with the Stars champ over here, and founded Uplifting Athletes. Kurt, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. I did not take my talents up across the border. I stayed in the U.S. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just did not. Once I was done in the U.S., I was done.
I understand. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we go on. But Kurt, we like to start each episode out with when you knew you were good at sports. Doesn't even have to be football, but like, what
Yeah.
was your earliest memory of, I'm pretty good at this?
I think for myself, I loved baseball, still love baseball, and the other sports were kind of just sports I wanted to just be able to do, not so much be. I wanted to be a baseball player, and I remember I was a shortstop and center fielder, but when I was younger, I was more shortstop. And I remember there was a play, it was hit over my head, so in between basically the outfielders and the infielders. And it was just one of those plays where I ran back, I dove, and I kind of caught it. And I was tracking the ball over my shoulder and caught it. And it was one of those moments where it took a lot of coordination, obviously athleticism, and I did it. And I was like, that that was a lot of fun. And I ended up making a lot of plays of similar nature to that. And then I think those were the moments where I realized, I mean, you don't see a lot of other kids make certain plays. And at that moment, I was like, well, there is something to this. But even then, you know, I never really thought about going pro. I just loved what I got to do, and I wanted to continue to just kind of, I say perfect my craft, but really it was just play. In my head, it was just playing. I was imagining a lot of scenarios, situations, and it was, I guess, if you were a bystander kind of watching me, you'd be like, this kid plays all this imaginative games by himself. I would have these tossbacks, and I would run through scenarios in my head constantly. But for me, it was just so much fun just to get out there, and I never wanted to be inside. I wanted to be outside, whether it was shooting basketball, throwing a football to myself, or like I said, all these baseball things that I kept on working on that ended up not being baseball player.
So when did that transition occur? I mean, you mentioned the love of the game, baseball.
Yeah.
I wish to let the people know you are part of the greatest high school graduating class ever, the class of 2006. Why is it the greatest? Because I was in it. So you were part of the greatest. But no, you were part of that class. But you mentioned baseball. How did football come into play?
Well, I think for me, my dad was a four sport athlete, even in college, and so I wanted to play as many sports as I could growing up. And so baseball, what if I had to rank them, it was baseball, football, basketball, track was really to help supplement football and any other sport that dealt with speed. I really didn't like track. I knew you need to be able to run. And the whole thought process of like, so you're telling me I'm going to continue to run so I can get to run. And that it just didn't jive with me, but I knew it was going to help me later on in my career. But and then really just really any sport. But I think when it started to kind of come to that juxtaposition of what direction do you want to go, I didn't have to choose. I let the journey kind of choose for me. Because if it was up to me, I would have stayed with baseball because I just love the game. My dad had played within the the Pittsburgh Pirates organization, so I always felt like baseball was going to be my avenue. For some of the things that I mentioned earlier, just as far as I knew I was athletic, and then when you talk about baseball players, I mean that puts you in a different category. If you are just a really athletic person, you're already kind of a step above. And then when you add the other intangibles, but I would say up until sophomore year, I still felt like baseball was going to be it. When I transitioned into my junior year, football obviously is in the fall. Had an unbelievable junior year. A lot of things went right for me, but also I remember the very first game of my junior year. Now, mind you, I didn't start on my football team until my junior year.
Okay.
So I was on the freshman team, JV team, and then junior year I got to play and start varsity. So I remember going into our very first game. It was a big highlight game. And it was growing up in Dayton, they always had this marquee game of the week. So it was my school versus another school called CJ. And this school CJ, they had a running back that was going to Michigan State, Javon Ringer. They had a safety that was going to Michigan, Brandon Harrison. They had another wide receiver that was going to, I believe, Indiana. And then they had a couple other guys, that were either going D1, D2. So it was a really good team going up against us. And I remember my dad telling me before the game, he said, look, there's going to be a lot of recruits here. They're here to see, this guy, that guy, this guy. But guess what? That doesn't mean they can't see you. And this is going to be your opportunity. So they weren't there to see me, but they're going to have an opportunity to see you. And it really struck a chord with me because it's like, okay, this is my challenge. I get an opportunity to go against one of the better wide receivers in our city, and then flip it over. When I get to go on offense, I get to show them what I can do on offense. And sure enough, it was just one of those games where I locked down the wide receiver, locked him down. I had an interception. I returned it for a touchdown. I got called back because we hit someone in the back. But so the interception still counted, just not the touchdown. But and then as far as the running back, if you ever have a chance, or if any one of the listeners like pull up some old school Javon Ringer high school tapes. When I tell you this man was, you talk about freak athletes. He was a black belt. Like, I mean, I think he squatted like 600 pounds. I mean, just some unnatural ability, and his balance was crazy. So it almost looked like Barry Sanders. I mean, obviously Barry is in a class of itself, but I said, think about in the high school realm, he was just untackleable. And I ended up having 10 solo tackles against him. So again,
Okay.
those things just kind of line up of you're doing a lot of the things well. And things just started to open up. From there, I ended up having a 3 interception game later on in that season, and so these offers just started to come in, and I ended up with the season with 10 interceptions, however many tackles. I think I ended up with like 400 something yards receiving, 7 touchdowns, and like it just things really started to kind of come my way, and so did the offers. And so I started to go to those things where I said, well, maybe I could play football at the next level, because at one point I was just strictly baseball. Now I really started to think about, well, maybe there is more to myself than just what I thought. And so I was letting that journey kind of take care of itself. And I really started to realize, baseball is a love of mine. It could be a dream, but this is an opportunity that I don't want to let pass up right now. And so I just started putting all my eggs into the football basket and started to train for football. And not really until that end of junior year into senior year where I was like, I'm all in on football. And and I couldn't have predicted it. And I'm glad I didn't, because maybe it might not have worked out the way I wanted to had I tried to force it. I just let it come, and I just let the work take care of itself.
Well, let's unpack a lot here, right? So you played four sports at one point growing up, right?
Yeah, at one point, yeah.
When did you pare that down? Because there's a lot of parents now who are of the mind, I have a running back, I have a quarterback. And so you see 8, 9 year olds with running back coaches, right?
Yeah.
And they're playing football, whether it be 7-on-7 or 2 seasons of contact all year long, right? So obviously you made it to the pros, but what are your thoughts on specialization at an early age?
Yeah, I try to tell a lot of parents. I mean, there is I think there's something to be said about that child that has these skills. You see them, they're 7, 8, and you're like, wow, those like where did you? And there's that specialization factor that come into play because I think they will stand out on a field when they have all the tools in the toolbox, especially at a young age. They stand out. Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will continue to stand out, or that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's best for them at that time. It does give them a leg up initially, but I think I'm of the mindset of playing, especially when they're young. Play as many different sports as possible for two different reasons. A, it's going to limit the injury because their body will be, I say, fresh in a sense, meaning that they're not constantly using the same movement repetitively over and over again. But also, it gives them a fresh perspective of a new way to kind of see the and visualize a game. So, for instance, if you're on a basketball court, well, you're dealing with five people on your side, including you, five on the other. There's different ways of seeing passing lanes, opportunities, setting up movement, if you're talking about posting up of how to use your body, um, there's just different ways of and getting rebounds of understanding, angles, like all those things that come into it. And then you translate it maybe into that spring sport of if it's baseball, I absolutely think baseball is a phenomenal way. If you want to be a wide receiver or a DB, reading a ball off of a baseball bat and trying to track it down, that is tough. But if you can do that, you can catch a football. I promise you that. It doesn't always work the other way around. You can catch a big football, but trying to read a baseball if you're not used to it. So I think, seeing that ball. But then if you're a quarterback, well, obviously there's a lot of throwing mechanics that you can use. Not everything, but there's a lot of way to kind of use your core torque for baseball swing, like using that leverage for power. Or if you're a golfer, it's the same type of, it's not the same swing, but it's the same way of using your body. And then obviously for football, I think winter time's great for wrestlers. So there's so many things that you can say that there's to have that versatility of all different sports. As you get older, I can kind of see that specialization, I would say around your teenage age, where you might want to say, okay, look, um, the old adage is 10,000 hours to master a craft.
Hmm.
But that they didn't say you have to have those 10,000 hours by the age of 13.
Right.
And I hope you don't, because then you're not going to be able to experience the fullness of really what I think youth sports it really has to offer. One of my, I don't want to say regrets because I don't try to live my life with regrets, but one of my things that I wish I would have done differently, I wish I would have played varsity basketball in my high school career. And I say that because I used that winter time to train for baseball,
Hmm.
to get myself ready, get my swing right, get my arm, you know. But I look back now, and if you had, we're not afforded the luxury to kind of look back in life and kind of insert self to change this decision here and there. It wouldn't have changed anything about who I was. It would have given me that opportunity to play something that now I play those kids in high school. You and I were talking about playing a little basketball before this. Now, one thing that I'm not going to do is I'm going to know when to kind of give up the 2 points because it's not worth certain things are not worth it. I'm not trying for dunks anymore because guess what? I don't trust the person that's beneath me to
Hmm.
look out for my for my longevity. Uh, whereas before the guy that was angry, like, I'm gonna try to do everything, but I like to play just to get up and down and let people know I still got the shot. I still I still can D you up if I need to, but I'm not gonna get. But it just I think that's the thing that you're not afforded the luxury to kind of look back in your later life to say, I wish I could have done it. So just do it. Allow them to experience it. Now, if they don't like the sport, don't force them to do it. But I think too many times kids are getting burnt out because they are doing too much in a particular field and there's nothing to kind of refill that bucket, refill that love. For me, like I said, baseball was my love. But guess what? I played so many different sports that allowed me to kind of refill that bucket. And I never got drained on one sport. And then obviously as I got older, had I just focused on baseball, I would have never made it as a football player.
I could see that.
And and so playing multiple sports allowed so many different, and I say the journey came to me. I just had to continue to work towards whatever it was. And I think there's so many stories that you can kind of pull from that. Now, like I said, if you're a pitcher, there are specialization things that are going to need to happen in order for you to be the best pitcher. I
Hmm.
think there is things to be said about that. Um, but I think while you're young, up until your teenage years, you're selling yourself short. You're selling your child's experience as a youth, and I keep saying youth because you're taking away their youthfulness by trying to make them professionals at such a young age. And it's the thing of, you know, how many professional athletes will there be? I'm not saying your child can't be it, but more likely than not, they will not be a professional athlete for whatever reason, whether it's the athletic ability that they've been given, whether it's an injury, whether it's this, whether it's that. Like the statistics speak for themselves. So why not let them experience everything that life has to offer and all those opportunities that they can, and you never know what may come from that if you give them that opportunity to play a different sport.
That's a lot of good information. You also mentioned a progression, right? So you played freshman, you played JV, then you played varsity your junior year. Uh, as I understand it, in my research, I didn't see that you transferred high schools. Am I correct in that?
I did not.
So, we're in an era now where it is not uncommon to see one, two, three high school transfers if a player doesn't hit varsity in eighth grade.
Yeah,
I'm being a little hyperbolic, but you get what I'm saying.
I do.
What are your thoughts on just allowing the progression to occur?
Yeah, I think it's necessary. I think for myself, I always enjoyed the adversity, the challenge, because really, when you are faced with adversity or when you're faced with a challenge, the only place you can actually look to is within.
Mhm.
If you try to look outside for those things to change your circumstance, you're taking you with you wherever you go. So you can change the location, but guess what? You're coming with you.
Mhm.
So I always looked at it when I didn't, you know, I knew I could play, but I wasn't. They had older guys. So what can I learn from them? What can I do to get myself in order in that position? And I remember vividly sophomore year. So how it worked in Ohio was the varsity games were played on Friday and JV games were played on Saturday morning.
Mhm.
So if you played at home, you'd have to go to the away team Saturday morning. And I remember vividly. I mean, I'm playing both ways, and I'm having a blast because it's still with my, basically my classmates. But I realized like I know I can play because I practice with these guys every day. Um, but it just wasn't my time and my opportunity. And the very last game of the year, we played a team called Saint X, and they're an all boys Catholic school. If Luke Kuechly came from, I mean,
Mhm.
it is a really it's a prestigious high school in Ohio, and we played them. And when I tell you, like, look, it was Chef Curry just cooking up a pot. I'm telling you, it was just one of those things. Every time I touched the ball, like I was just going every which direction, taking it on both sides of the ball. And I remember he was the wide receivers coach, but he was the head JV coach. And he's like, I don't know what you're doing right now, but you're doing something special right now. And and at that moment, I think that was like that aha moment where I really am I can level up.
Okay.
And so the head coach came up to me, and unfortunately, I ended up a kid had kind of taken out my knee, and I had sprained my MCL. And so the coach was basically going to start me in our varsity playoff game that following week had I not gotten injured.
Okay.
Because he just really, I mean, it all kind of came together, and I looked at again. It's just another opportunity. Like I didn't get my chance to start on varsity my sophomore year in a playoff game, but it's all right. Like what am I going to do to continue to refine and build myself up? And I always looked at every opportunity like that. I mean, you can go throughout my whole career, whether you're talking in high school, college, and the professional ranks, where I was faced with a lot of different adversities throughout. I was typically the guy that was counted out, and I
Mhm.
had to not look at I got to prove them wrong. I said, I got to prove myself right. I was always willing to bet on myself and the work that I put in, the preparation, and I knew when it came down to it, you weren't going to beat me. And so I think that those are things that I enjoyed. Not everyone enjoys those moments.
Why were you like that? I mean, just this simple question, but like, where did that come from? When did you get that internal fire? Right.
I think I would say I always had that fire. I was one of nine kids growing up. I was the youngest boy growing up, and just when you have siblings, I think siblings do a great job of, especially when you're younger, they do a great job of making sure you're low man on the totem pole. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're constantly fighting to be kind of seen or stay with them. And I think that's kind of what I appreciated. I'm thankful for those moments and those opportunities for that. But even, I can remember vividly, like I did not really grow into my body. I was, I don't want to say small, but definitely wasn't one of the tallest as I was growing up. And so again, we talk about specialization, but there's certain kids that kind of sprout up, so they're the tallest or the biggest at a young age, and so again they stand out in youth sports.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they will end up as the best. Now some do, but it was just one of those things where I remember I had a couple friends and they were tall. And I'm like, and they were doing some, but I'm like, I can hang with them. Like, I know I can hang with them. But, again, coaches favor, there's favoritism in off the eye test and all this stuff. So, I never let it discourage me. And I think that if there's any advice that I would tell a parent to encourage their children is don't let the thief of comparison discourage you of just encouraging and raising and pouring into your child. I think comparison will kill everybody, whether it's I'm comparing myself to them or I'm comparing my child to that child. It will kill everything about what it really is and who they are. And so I would just encourage a parent, I would encourage a young athlete that's listening is compare yourself to yourself. Look at yourself yesterday. Did I get better today? And let those be the comparisons of how you kind of look at yourself. But so like I said, I mean, those things that I had to look at it was within. And I think for me, I had the luxury of having older siblings that kind of kept me in check.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was I would say humbled because they humbled me. But I always wanted to work. I love the aspect of working. And it was weird, and I have this tick to myself now. If it's almost of have you done enough today? And there was a story growing up, and my baseball coach used to tell us a story of I believe it was John F. Kennedy, but if we have fact checkers out there, I'm going to say that's not it could be off on the person, but let's just call it
Okay.
JFK. And someone used to drive by the building, or JFK used to drive by this building, and he would see that all the lights are off except one. And he noticed day after day, night after night, all the lights would be off except one. And one day he decided to figure out who was up in that building up there. And sure enough, it was his competitor. And
Hmm.
so while he was going home to sleep and rest and do all that, his competitor was staying up late and making sure he was doing that extra thing. And so the analogy of is there's always something more that you can do. And so for people to like ask, what is the workout today? Well, the workout is the only what you're going to make of it. So I can give you a workout and we can do literally the exact same workout. But if you're only doing it, call it 50% max capacity, and I'm going everything I got, well, guess what? Over time, I will end up beating you. I will be stronger than you. I'll be mentally stronger than you. So all those things kind of go into like I always felt like I could always do more. And those days that I didn't do more, I almost looked at like, what's wrong with you? And so I still have those internal voices of, did you do enough today? And if I can say yes, then shoot, I sleep soundly. But for those moments that I was like, man, you could have woke up earlier to do the workout. You knew you had a long day. You knew that you were going to have this and this. Like, why didn't you wake up earlier? I wanted to get 45 minutes. I wanted to get an extra hour of sleep. Did it really help? I mean, what's the difference between 5 hours and 6 hours of sleep? I'm not sure. But psychologically, it felt better. but did it really? So, it's just those things that I think we can tell ourselves, we can give ourselves an easy out. We can give ourselves the excuse of this was a long day, or, I had tests, I had this, or I had a long week. Like, we can always find a way to give our excuses, but do we always find ways to create that moment, that time, that space for us to continue to grow? And I think it's easier to say, no, we couldn't do it versus no, I should have done it.
This is all insightful stuff. I mean, this is great stuff for not just athletes, but parents as well. Just kind of understanding that mentality, understanding, the self motivation necessary to go where you want to go. For me, I believe that you have to be about what you say you're going to be about. It's easy to say stuff. It's easy to, say I'm going to do something, but did you actually do it?
Hmm.
But I want to make a transition here. So you do really well your junior year, your senior year. Well, who gave you your first offer?
Ooh, the first offer. Ooh, I, I can't. I don't remember the very first offer. I know that the very first time that I remember, like, this is kind of real, was we had, so it was still my junior year. We had a couple seniors, and they were going down to visit Kentucky, and that was my first taste of like kind of being really recruited. So Kentucky was probably a two. The University of Kentucky was about a 2-hour drive down. So
Mhm.
my head coach brought me, my quarterback, and a wide receiver. We all went down to the University of Kentucky because 2 years before that, our defensive end was recruited by them and ended up going to Kentucky. So it was great. I was like, man, this grass is really nice. This is the bluegrass, Bermuda. I finally started to see like the atmosphere, and uh, I think at that moment I realized like, and I'd received that offer from them, and as I realized like this is my next stage. This is that next platform. But even then, you know, I don't think my mindset was. It's just the mindset shift of, for me, I never looked at it as a recruiting game. I always looked at it like, what is it that I can do to continue to get better? And as I continue to produce, obviously, bigger schools. I feel like everything that I needed was at my fingertips. Then, again, you have those really, I think, influential people in your life. And for me, it was my dad and he was my defensive coordinator, DB coach, history teacher. And those two guys kind of went with me on recruiting visits. And I was very thankful because we went to Kansas State where we had one of my high school teammates play there. So I had a chance to go visit them. Then I went out to Iowa. Ohio State was next on my chopping block, and then I was supposed to go to West Virginia and Tennessee. And some schools were telling me, you can play both ways. Some schools were saying, we see you as corner, safety, whatever.
Mhm.
And again, I'm 16 years old, and I was telling myself, I mean, these schools aren't telling me I can play both ways. Like, I'm going to start chopping them off the block. Like, I can play both ways. Little did you know, I mean, playing both ways. I mean, Travis Hunter is a rarefied athlete to be able to do what he did for as many games, as many plays. Like, that is extremely hard. Now that you have people that could play both ways, but they're really spotty players. So the Charles Woodsons, he was a great athlete. He was a DB that got sparing time on offense. You put the ball in his hands, some special things happen. Same thing, you can go. Chris Gamble. There's certain players that you will play on both sides, but they're not both two-way players.
Right.
And what I realize is, again, if I wanted to be my best self, I needed to say, who am I going to be and what place would give me that opportunity? But more importantly, what place is going to give me the best education for me? And because, again, I wasn't saying I'm going to go here to go to the pros. Like, too many times we get caught in trying to get to that destination and not really focusing on the journey in the process of and of itself. So for me, I said, look, I want to go to the place where um, I'm going to have a great education, and if all else fails, my education will follow me for the rest of my life. The interesting piece was when I started going on my recruiting tours. A lot of coaches were talking about, well, all right, we see you as this player. We're gonna, this is where we see you in your freshman year, sophomore year, so on and so forth. Um, the only school that talked to me about what did I want to do or during my time as far as at the university, what did I want to study? What kind of career did I want to have? Didn't even talk to me about football. Was the Ohio State Buckeyes, Jim Tressel. And as a matter of fact, I gotta show you this. So I'll show you this actually later on. But he gave me a stack of cards, and it was phenomenal because all these stacks of cards had all these virtues. They had different morals and values on them. And he said, pick the 5 things that kind of best represent you: faith, family, education, um, football, and in that order. So my faith, I knew had to be at the top of my list,
Hmm.
no matter what. And then it was my family. And then it was my friends, and it was education, and then football I had at the bottom. Because I knew if I had football at the bottom, if all these things were aligned, no matter what happened here, I would be okay. But
Okay.
if you move the pillars for that, then if I had football at the top, well, if I'm not starting, or if my expectation of this isn't happening, or if I don't like this coach, everything below it is getting shaky. It's on shaky ground. So I really did feel like by him kind of again opening my eyes to what else is out there. Um, he really was setting up a plan for not just to be successful on the field, but how to be successful off the field.
So, was it a simple decision once you went to Ohio State? Did you just kind of shut it down and say, "This is for me," or was it a tough decision with the two mentors that you had as well as the rest of your community?
Yeah, I really do think Ohio State was obviously it was the easy decision. I mean, there was a lot of factors that made Ohio State, but I tried to make sure that I wasn't making it based off of, again, external factors. I had my brother and sister already at Ohio State, but
Okay.
I didn't have them at the top of my list because they were there. Um, it was an hour drive versus Kansas State, which was, I mean, you're going to the middle of the country. Same thing with Iowa. I mean,
Hmm.
West Virginia wasn't too far, and then Tennessee again. But I wanted to make the decision not based off of the simplicity of it all. I really wanted to make sure that it was what was right for me. And I think, like I said, when you looked at everything laid out in the plan, Ohio State, they were a great team. They were very consistent with their play, um, especially from when Tress got there in '02 to when I started being recruited in '05. I said this team not only has won a championship, but they have a class that's reloaded and reloaded. And I knew the success was going to be there. It's tough to go to a program too when you're looking at it and they just hired a new coach, but that coach, he's looking to kind of move on the ranks and
Right.
continue to climb the ladder. Tress was from Ohio. Like he didn't have any other aspirations to go anywhere else. Like it wasn't he was an Ohio person through and through. And again, I think for me, when I did reflect on what were the pros to go in Ohio State and what were the cons, having family close by was something that I cared about. I said faith and then family. And
Hmm.
so having family close by was actually important to me. I had my brother that I was able to lean on. Him and I lived together all 4 years when I was at Ohio State. So like that that didn't play a factor initially, but when you really laid out the list of what did it mean to be an Ohio State Buckeye versus West Virginia Mountaineer and all those other schools, all those things they fit my pillars. And when it fit my pillar, I said, this is the best decision. No matter what happens in my career in football, this was the best decision for me as a person.
Got it. So, just a quick question: did you have? I know your dad played professionally. Did you have older siblings that had gone to college for sports?
No, no.
Okay, so you were the first to go for sports.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I had a cousin at the time. We are the same age, so it didn't stand for too long, but he had the Ohio basketball scoring record, and then he had won. I mean, several track hurdle champion. I mean, he was an incredible athlete. He ended up going to St. X to play basketball. But so him and I were kind of like the first to kind of go to quote unquote college, D1 college to play.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things that a lot of parents will ask, is if I haven't had a child to go through this and I didn't go through this, you know, what am I supposed to be doing? How do I know what the truth is and what the truth is not? But as we get into Ohio State, now we're here, we're locked in. You're moved in with your brother. You're
Yeah,
in practice. What was that transition like?
it was interesting. So one thing that we didn't talk about is when made the decision to go to Ohio State, I graduated high school early. I
Okay.
enrolled I enrolled in April, so I wanted to play spring ball again. My mindset was I wanted to go to Ohio State. I want to start my freshman year. And and so it was, I mean, I think everything you could have thought of as far as that opportunity to be able to go to Ohio State. And I'm going through the spring ball routines, family coming by, and then 2 weeks into my spring ball kind of career, I made a routine tackle. We were having a scrimmage and ended up paralyzing one of my teammates.
Mm.
And I think I was really hit with a moment of what do I want to do with my career? Um, I thought about quitting football because there was a lot of guilt. There was a burden sitting on my shoulders. And, um, I think again, through my pillar of faith, through my family, I think through my good friend and their family, the Gentrys, they helped lift that burden off of me. And,
Mhm.
my coaches were there for me. They understood that this was a traumatic situation for both sides, and they were there for myself, but they were also there for them. And it gave us, Tyson and I, a bond that is unbreakable, forged through, obviously something traumatic, but he's been able to do so many wonderful things now. He has a foundation that he's doing stuff for spinal cord injuries. I mean, he's got a family, he's got two kids. It's a beautiful thing that's kind of come from that as well. So I look at that. My first initial couple weeks was it was crazy. It was
Okay.
crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and but I think the blessing of it all was I learned a lot about myself throughout that time. And I did realize this though, um, that I made the right decision by having that family close, by having a great network of people, and I started to learn more and dive into my faith as well.
So, well, yeah, you jump right in there, huh? So, as you now transition past, not past, but as you build from this experience, as you use this experience to build you up, you get into your sophomore year, junior. Now you're looking at pros. You mentioned that you did not go to Ohio State. You did not get into this thinking, I'm going to be a pro. Like some children will say, I'm going to be a pro at 8 years old. I'm going to be a pro at 9 years old. But you're getting towards the end of the road at Ohio State here. And now what's your decision like? Are you like, well, I'll go get a job? Or are you looking at the NFL? And if so, what was that process like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was definitely looking at the NFL after my sophomore year, just because you got to start thinking about. I'd already started my whole year, sophomore year. Going into my junior year, that's the first time you can kind of declare if you decide to go to the
Mhm.
NFL. So obviously, you want to have a good year. For me, I think the thing that led me to believe I knew I'd be successful in the pros is there were several wide receivers that I got to go against on a daily basis that ended up being in the pros. Anthony Gonzalez, Antonio Holmes, Ted Ginn, Brian Rubisky, Brian Hart. Like, I mean, the list goes on and on and
Can I
on and
pause you
on.
and ask a question?
Yeah.
How fast is Ted Ginn in person?
How fast?
Yeah. Like
Oh
you
my
had to guard
goodness.
him. Like how fast is he? How fast is he in person?
So, um, I mean, it's tough to say what his exact speed was because I think he got faster so for a fade route,
Hmm.
like he builds speed, and it's just so, hey, I thought I had teammates of Deshaun Jackson and Ted Ginn.
Hmm.
So I always felt like Deshaun was quicker off the ball, but Ted was faster. And so that top end speed is just crazy. I mean, it'd be interesting to see like if you could go back into his earlier reels of his days in Miami, what his top end speed was, because that he just put when he put his head down, you knew you weren't catching him. And I promise you, if you watch old clips of his touchdowns, just once that head drops, it's like he's running the 100 and he's just gone. Um, but yeah, to answer your question, there wasn't much guarding Ted. It's just don't give up the fade.
Okay.
Like you just play off. If he catches a hitch, catches a curl, you come up and tackle it. Just don't give up the deep ball.
I got you. Well, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's always, people see professional athletes, but they see professional athletes or they see high level college athletes going against other high level college athletes. So it's kind of skews just how fast people are, right? Again, watching like Ted getting run, and I'm from Philadelphia, so watching Deshaun Jackson run, it's just
Yeah.
like, or I had the blessing of working out a couple times with Randy Moss, and I got to see
Mm.
him run
Long.
in person. It's different. It's
Top end speed.
it is different. But
Yeah.
let's get back to your process for the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so I think going from my sophomore to junior year, like that was it really started to kind of say, you know, that opportunity could present itself, if you have a successful junior year. Um, at the end of my junior year, we had an incredible DB room. So it was me, Donald Washington, Chimmy Chekwa, we had Anderson Russell, and then you had the Thorpe winner, Malcolm Jenkins.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously myself. And what was interesting was Malcolm had won the Thorpe, and he had a good year. He had a really good year. He played corner, and we'd move him over to safety in some situations. I mean, he was showing his versatility. Um, Statistic wise, I had the better year. And so, not to say that he wasn't deserving of the Thorpe, but what it told me was, well, if Malcolm is winning the Thorpe and doing this, and everyone had projected him a first round draft pick, and I said, oh, I'm setting myself up, for what it could be. And so by the end of the year, I had a decision to make. Do you declare for the draft? Do you not declare? My draft card came back, and it was kind of that late second day, possible third day. And I said, you know what? That's not good enough to kind of leave early.
Mm-hmm.
If you were a first round draft pick, obviously that's something that you say it's life changing.
Yeah.
Um, I said, you know what, I'm going to stay for my senior year, and I'm going to kind of see this thing through. Up until that point, too, we had lost two national championships. We had lost in the Fiesta Bowl on a last second touchdown. And I said, I want to come back my senior year. I want to do this thing the right way. I want us to finish our year off with a bowl victory. Obviously, a national championship would be the end goal, but just leave with a bowl victory since I hadn't won one yet. And sure enough, that's kind of how it played out. I was, again, I think surrounded by some really great talented people. And I, things just, you stick to the plan and you ride it out. I was named a captain. I was an first team All-American. I was named the MVP of my team that year. And we ended up winning the bowl game against Oregon in the Rose Bowl. And I think that's what you kind of hope for. But it doesn't always, fall into your hand. But this time it did. And again, I end my career at Ohio State with some really big numbers. And I'm thinking, Malcolm went first round last year. You just did what you did, but did it even better. You're gonna go like, and so my expectation of myself was, and I knew who kind of what safeties were gonna be going out in the year. Well, let me name you some of the safeties of my class. Eric Berry,
He's pretty good.
uh, Earl Thomas,
Yeah, he's pretty good too.
yeah, um, Cam Chancellor,
Yeah, he's really good.
yeah, and then we had some other guys that were drafted ahead of me, and it was just interesting because I played with a guy. So when I was drafted by Philadelphia in 2010, Nate Allen was a second round draft pick coming out of University of South Florida. And you see these guys on TV or you go to the combine, you go against them, you're like, I mean, what's the difference? Well, I realized what the difference was. I was 5'11". Other guys were either 6 foot and above, or either some guys, I ran a 4.49. Some
Mhm.
guys ran, 4.40s. And so like you realize like there's certain things that, on a playing field, you may not notice a difference, but when you look at the charts, and you realize that's why, I fell. Um, but I was okay with that. I was again faced with another piece of my expectation of myself was I know I can play with these first round guys. I know what my worth is. I know what my value is. It doesn't matter if they don't see it yet. I can prove it to them. And that was what I was fine with that. So again, they had drafted Nate Allen second round. They drafted me seventh round.
Mhm.
Seventh round draft picks, if they cut you, that's no loss. They're not
Right.
cutting a second round draft pick. So I knew when I went to Philadelphia, I had to change my mindset of this is you got to do everything in your possible will to make sure that you are being seen, that you're doing all the little things well. Well, here's another card that was dealt that I couldn't control. Ohio State was on quarter systems, versus typically schools are on semesters.
Right.
So the only camp that I could go to was a rookie mini camp. I had to sit out of all of OTAs, and then I had to come get and be ready for training camp in August or late
So
July.
hold on, let me ask you this. Was that a choice, or could you have said, look, Ohio State, I've been drafted. I'm not going to go to classes anymore. I'll do that later.
No, no, it didn't matter if I was graduating that year, which I did,
Okay.
or so it didn't matter just because of they go based off of when your school is let out, and so that's just kind of how things
Oh,
align.
okay.
And so I had to miss everything. And so for me, like I had to do all the little things right. I had them send me the playbook, and I would just spend hours writing down the free safety side, the nickel side, or the nickels and the strong safety, so I could learn the whole positions. And I would just write it down. And I would every day I would just write things down. And so I developed a really good habit of learning how to learn playbooks. And then I spent a day and a half at my coach's house because he lived in Ohio. So when they broke from training camp, or from mini camp, I should say, I had a chance to go visit with him and kind of learn it again as if I was in the classroom. I did all the little things because I had to gain an edge because I missed so much. I
Hmm.
didn't get a chance to get those reps in, and I was so when I got to training camp, I think we had 10 safeties, 10 or 11 safeties going into training camp. And again, seventh round draft pick. You're selected, but it's not. They're not crying over if they have to cut you.
Right.
And so I did special teams. Made sure I developed a routine of catching balls before, and I wanted to be the first ones out to practice and do all those little things. They ended up only keeping 3 safeties at the beginning of the season. Nate Allen, who was a second round draft pick,
Hmm.
Quentin Michael, who was
Hmm.
in his ninth year, who was a longtime player in Philadelphia, and then myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the story is never finished if you don't let it be finished. It may not start the way you want it to start, but it's not going to be finished. And that's something that I would just, again, encourage people is your expectation may not meet the reality of the situation, but that doesn't mean that it can't end up in your favor if you are willing to work through whatever that is.
So this is also the first time that you're outside of Ohio, right?
Yep.
Um, how was that? Making the show is really about making transitions um, as positively as possible. So how
Yeah.
was that transition? You mentioned that having your family around was a factor in choosing Ohio State. It was a benefit to you at Ohio State, but
hmm
now you're a pro, and you're a pro, backed up against a corner in Philadelphia, which is a great city to be in, probably the best city in the country. But still, you're without family. How did that work?
Does Lehigh still fall into that category for you?
Does Lehigh?
Yeah. Do you still throw Lehigh into that Philadelphia? Because that's where I
That's
was. I was in Lehigh. I was up in Lehigh for training camp.
Yeah, I guess we'll let it ride. Yes, we'll let
Okay,
it
well,
ride.
all right, all right, all right. No, I have um a lot of respect for the Philadelphia Lehigh. My wife is from Doylestown, so there's a lot of love that I have for everyone up there. And I think the one thing that I learned about myself was, again, you remember the thing that I was just telling you about. You always have enough time to work.
Mhm.
There's always something you could be doing. One thing that I really started to do was kind of read and meditate a little bit, and jot down some thoughts and notes. So that was actually something that helped kind of calm myself or calm my mind when I felt like things were kind of out of my control. And that really was a nice practice for myself. I still do. I love personal growth books
Okay.
because I felt like, again, the person that I have to, again, compare myself to the person that I can, or the thing that I can continuously control is me and within, and how I see things, how I think about things, how I visualize things, and all those things within my control. Whether I got 10 reps during the team group or period, or I got 1 rep, I didn't get control of that. The coaches controlled that.
Mhm.
So why am I going to focus on that? What I did get to control was, how did those 10 reps look? Or how did that 1 rep look? What kind of effort did you give? Did you know your assignment? Did you make a play? Did you miss the tackle? Like all those things, I got to control that. And so for myself, I started to become my greatest critic because if I was my greatest critic, it would not bother me if a coach was upset with me. It wouldn't make me happy if a coach was happy with me. I needed to have that critique of looking through myself through that same lens day in and day out. And that's what allowed me to continue to refine and sharpen my pencil. Because, the hardest thing for some athletes is they go a long time, years, with coaches just praising them. And I
Right.
was, we talk, and they just live off of praise. But when
Right.
they get dealt that hand of adversity, and they get dealt with that hand of criticism, how do they handle that? And so for me, it was I wanted to be my greatest critic. That way, whether it was good or whether it was bad, was there something that I could do to refine and improve? And if it's the answer is yes, then I needed to do it. If there was nothing there, then you know what? I can continue to move on. So that was something that I really did learn early on. But even so, I would say from in my second year, I started to feel myself. You go through those
Okay.
stages, and I think it's a natural thing. They named me the incumbent starter going in, and so I was like, got it. I ended up getting benched after the third game. I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't
Hmm.
producing enough, and and you realize too. NFL, not for long. You're as good as your last game. All those phrases, it's real, and they're constantly looking to replace you. And you better have that feeling of, am I doing enough? And so it was a humbling moment. That was a humbling moment, but it was a great time to kind of again reflect and figure out what did I need to do differently in order to be successful again when I had my next shot.
So I want to wrap up on this, and it's a big thing going on now. And you are well suited to speak on it, give advice on it, share opinions on it. We've talked about how a lot, and this show is about the how a lot. How did you make that decision? How did you overcome?
Hmm.
How did you? You never once mentioned money, right? But what has changed now is even on the high school level, money is a player, right?
Hmm.
Um, Kids are getting offered money to move high schools, usually in football and basketball, but some other sports as well. Athletes are being paid in college, primarily football players, and then followed up by basketball players. How does money? How would you? Let's talk personally. How would you handle that if you're a parent? And then how would you handle that if you take yourself back to 2005 as a athlete?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I think with this day and age, it is tough to not follow the money train,
Hmm.
especially just with how. I mean, the joke is just kind of with how inflation is, taking over everything, and to get eggs. But in all seriousness, I think it is. You never want to shortchange a short-term return versus a long-term return. And so, what does that look like? Why am I going to go to this place that's not going to develop me the way I need to be just so I can have, a quick 50,000, 100,000, whatever the case may be. Now, that 50,000, 100,000 at that moment, it is life changing. It can change a lot of scenarios and situations. I don't disagree with that. But if someone were to say, I'm going to give you 100,000 right now, you take it right now, that's it. Or I'm going to give you 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, whatever that number is, but you're not going to get that yet. You got to wait 10 more years.
Mm.
I- All I'm saying is it doesn't always work out the way you want it to work out. And I was actually listening to a podcast um, with Dave Potnoy, and he is the owner of Barstool Sports.
Hmm.
And you should listen about how he had started Barstool and he was working two jobs. It was about to go under. They weren't actually net profit until almost 12 years into the business.
Okay.
How many times do you think he had a chance to kind of give up, throw it away? but he realized it wasn't about the money, it was about the product, it was about the process. And if he was not diligent, there may not have been that. He may not have been successful. The company wasn't going to be successful, but he was diligent on those aspects. So he wasn't worried about turning the profit. He was worried about turning the process. He was focused on putting out a product that was worthy, that had the value. And once he created that product that was worthy of the value, the money came. Think about that as an athlete. If you're focused on the process to develop the product, the value will continue to increase. And so the investment that you want to have, yes, if you can get both in a beautiful scenario, you go to a place, they're going to give you money and you're going to get developed. That's all you could ask for. I mean, it's
Mhm.
both. Um, to what I would say though is like, I mean, when you do get the money, what are you doing with it? Again, I'm big on building successful lives outside of the sport. The sport's going to give you the platform. How can you build a successful life outside of it? And so that generational wealth is coming from you want to have something that you can have for your life, your children's life, and hopefully your children's children's life. And so that's that thing that I want people to realize is you can go anywhere to get a short-term profit, but that long-term money will not be there. And so you really have to just really look at that landscape of kind of where everything is. But when I talk to my guys at Ohio State, when I talk to my other friends, up at Notre Dame and all this stuff, you'll be found no matter where you're at. If you're a
Okay.
good player, I promise you, schools will find you. So don't get caught in the rat race of I have to go here to get seen. I promise you, if you can play, you will be found.
Okay. Kurt Coleman has spoken, people. We have given, I believe, truly life changing advice, truly impactful, meaningful, actionable advice, actionable stories. Kurt, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it. This is a great time.
Yes, yes. And in all that advice, guess what we didn't do? We never once answered how tall will they be because we're not. So this has been another episode of How Tall Will They Be? Check us out next time.